So what do Christians mean when we say faith? Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 reads, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Most Christians who read the Bible understand that while it says what it means generally, there are different kinds of meaning. For example, in Matthew chapter 3 verses 4 through 6, Matthew writes, "Then Jerusalem and all Judea and all the region about the Jordan were going out to him, and they were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins." Now, this is, of course, talking about John the Baptist, but no Christian supposes that everyone in Jerusalem, the city, and everyone in all of Judea, the country, went to see John and were baptized by him. There's a Hebrew paradigm which uses hyperbole to express an extreme. We do something similar in English, for example, when we say, "I went to the basketball game yesterday, everyone was there." We don't mean that every person on the planet attended the basketball game. What we mean was that there were a lot of people at the game, and this is what Matthew means when he says all of Jerusalem and Judea went to be baptized by him. In a similar way, the definition of faith in Hebrews 11:1 expresses one aspect of the truth of the word, but it is not trying to be as precise or as thorough as we might wish it were. Now, I have no doubt that the writer of Hebrews wrote as the Spirit inspired them, and that the first verse of Hebrews 11 is exactly what God wants it to be, but we make a mistake when we attempt to pass off Hebrews 11:1 as a comprehensive, definitive definition of the word faith. I struggled with this for a very long time because I, like many, wanted the Bible to be something other than what it is. I wanted it to have all the beauty of the greatest works of art ever made while also adhering to the absolute precision of a college textbook. The truth is, the Bible falls somewhere in the middle of that scale. Sure, there are these amazingly beautiful passages such as Psalm 23 and Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, along with many others, and there are other almost scientifically precise passages in the books, in the Bible, such as Leviticus and Numbers. But the reality is that the Bible is a real book, written by real people, dealing with the real world, and that it would be far less useful to us if it were otherwise. Now, all of that to say this, and this is easily misunderstood, faith is a dirty word. Now, I don't mean it's profane. Far from it. The word faith does the best job that it can, within human language, within human thought, within the brokenness of the human condition, to describe a difficult concept. Faith is a word that takes a lot of abuse from both those who understand it and also from those who don't. For example, in the movie A Miracle on 34th Street, a young wife struggles to understand her husband's motivations for helping the main character. The husband says that it comes down to having faith, and then he offers this horrible definition of it. Faith, he says, is believing in something when common sense tells you not to. Now, as a Christian, I can honestly say I hate that definition. Common sense tells me that climbing into the polar bear enclosure at the zoo is a bad idea. If I simply decide that, being a man of faith, I'll be safe, and I climb in there anyway, odds are very good that I would never come out. From this perspective, then, faith is a dangerous thing, and those who hold to it are foolish, and that's why I hate this definition of faith. Not only is it completely wrong, it's dangerous and destructive. So what is faith? Faith is believing in something you cannot understand based on evidences which you can understand. Now, what do I mean? When I was a kid in high school, we were studying fractions. Our teacher, a wonderful and kind lady, Mrs. L., was helping us deal with fractions, and she told us that to multiply a fraction, we simply multiply the numerator, the top number, with the numerator of the second fraction, and we multiply the denominator, the bottom number, with the denominator of the second fraction, straight across the page. Simple enough. But then she said, to divide fractions, you flip the second fraction upside down, so that the numerator becomes the denominator and vice versa, and then you just multiply straight across. And it seemed to me that this was something of an arbitrary way of doing it. It seemed silly. So I raised my hand and I asked, why? Mrs. L. looked at me and smiled in that kindly way of hers. She knew that I was not a skilled math student. She knew I'd never study advanced mathematics, even in college, and she knew that I didn't have the background in mathematics to understand the answer that she would have to give me. So she smiled at me and she said, just because. Now I shrugged. Okay, just because. She's the one grading the tests. She's the one with the college degree. She's the one who decides what the right and wrong answers are, so I'm going to do it her way. I have every reason to believe her, so I'm going to do as she says. Many years later, I was in college. I was an English major, as far away from advanced mathematics as I could get. And my roommate and best friend was an engineering major, as far away from literature as he could get. We were a great team. Anyway, I was sitting in the living room of the apartment we shared, and one day when he got home from school, he walked in, dropped his backpack, and looked at me. Do you remember when Mrs. L. told us to flip the second fraction and multiply across? He asked after some brief conversation. Yeah, I replied. I never understood why. Well, he said, today in my advanced trigonometry class, we found out why. Suddenly I understood. Mrs. L., the math teacher, had a perspective on the world that I didn't have. There were very good, very practical reasons for flipping the second fraction and multiplying across, but I didn't have the background or the perspective to understand it when I was 14. I still don't. But someone does. My roommate, his professors, Mrs. L., and everyone else capable of understanding these concepts. I am not among that number, but I don't doubt the truth of it. So what does this have to do with faith? I had every reason to believe Mrs. L. She had the education, she had the experience, she had the grade book, and she was paid by the state of Ohio to teach me these things. I didn't have to grasp every aspect of everything she was teaching in order to believe that she knew what she was doing. I simply had to have faith in her. Again, faith is believing in something you cannot understand based on evidences which you can understand. Now, I understood who Mrs. L. was and what she had done to get to her position. I had seen previously mathematical concepts which I came to understand completely, and I had every reason to believe that she was being honest. As a Christian, I look at the world around me. I don't understand most of it. I realize that water evaporates, rises, condenses in the clouds, and falls back to the earth as rain, but I don't understand what evaporation actually is. I understand that seasons are caused by the 26-degree angle of the axis of the earth relative to the position of the sun, but there are a lot of things about that concept that I don't understand either. I know God is in control of it all. I have faith that He understands it and that He created it. Why? Because what I can see informs what I cannot. Now, nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. So if I believe that God is the origin of the universe, as I argued in my previous video, the argument from infinite regression of causes, then it follows naturally that God understands and controls the universe. If I understand that God created me, then it follows naturally that God understands me too. Again, faith is believing in something you cannot understand based on evidences which you can understand. I know that God created human beings. I know that God gives them life. It is therefore only a small leap of faith to say that God can also resurrect the dead, such as Jesus or Lazarus, for example. And that is what Christians talk about when we talk about faith.